I was still crying as they lowered my father's casket into the ground. The sky was gray, and everything felt heavy. My heart was already broken, but what happened next broke it even more. My wife sat down next to me quietly. I thought she came to comfort me. Instead, she handed me a white envelope. I looked at her, confused. She didn't say a word, just stared at me with a blank face. I opened the envelope with shaking hand. Inside were divorce papers. At my father's funeral. I couldn't believe it. I looked at her again, hoping it was a mistake or some sick joke. But her face stayed cold. I couldn't speak. I felt like the air had left my lungs. How could she do this now, of all times? I had just lost my father, and now she was leaving me too. It didn't make sense. We were supposed to face things together. I thought she loved me. I thought we had something real. I thought we were just going through a hard time. But clearly, I was wrong. The rest of the funeral was a blur. I don't even remember who spoke or what they said. All I could think about were those papers in my pocket and the woman who used to be my whole world sitting there like a stranger. I didn't cry anymore. I felt numb. My hands were cold. My thoughts were loud. Over and over, I kept asking myself, why now? Why here? What had I missed? People came up to me to say sorry about my dad. I nodded and thanked them, but I wasn't really there. I just wanted to leave. I needed to be alone. That night, I sat in my father's empty house, surrounded by silence. I looked around at the pictures on the wall, the old chair he always sat in, the books he never finished. It hit me that I was alone now in more ways than one. But something didn't feel right. Her timing, her face, the way she just handed those papers like it was nothing. It was like she'd planned it. Like she was waiting for the perfect moment to hurt me the most. And maybe she was. Maybe there was something she didn't want me to know. That thought stayed with me all night. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking. Looking back, that was the moment everything started to change. The moment I knew I had to find out the truth. Because this wasn't just about a divorce. It was about lies, secrets, and betrayal deeper than I ever imagined. After the funeral, I packed up what little I cared to take and moved into my father's old house. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that sits on your chest and doesn't let you breathe right. I told myself I needed space to think, to grieve, to figure things out. But the truth is, I couldn't bear to be around my wife anymore. Even thinking about her made my stomach turn. The way she handed me those divorce papers without a flicker of emotion, that moment played in my head over and over. I tried to understand where it all went wrong. At first, I thought maybe the grief had just pulled us apart, that maybe we both didn't know how to handle it. But as I sat alone in that creaky house with its old wooden floors and dusty furniture, I started replaying everything. Not just the funeral, but the last few months of our marriage. Her sudden late nights at work, the way she flinched when I touched her, her phone always face down, the fake laughs, the forced kisses, the way she'd smile but her eyes looked somewhere else. I remembered the night I asked her if something was wrong. She smiled and said, "You're just stressed." I believed her. I told myself I was overthinking it. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to lose her. But now, sitting in my father's empty chair, I saw it clearly. She had already left me, emotionally, mentally, long before she handed me those papers. The funeral was just her final act. The hardest part was realizing how much of it was a lie. I kept going back to the beginning. When we first met, she was warm, funny, full of life. She made me feel like I could do anything, like she truly cared. We built a life together. I trusted her with everything. My dreams, my money, my heart. I thought we were a team. I thought we had the kind of love that could survive anything. But now, every memory felt fake. I didn't know what was real anymore. Had she ever loved me? Or had it all been part of some long game? I started noticing little things I had ignored before. Her fake concern when my dad got sick. The way she talked about him, always polite but cold. And when he died, she didn't cry. Not even once. She just said he lived a full life, like it was some casual goodbye. I thought she was being strong for me, but maybe she just didn't care. I began to realize that she had checked out of our marriage a long time ago. And maybe I did too in some way. I was busy with work, with taking care of my dad. I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. Love makes you blind, or at least it makes you look away when things get uncomfortable. I looked away too many times. Now the house creaked at night like it was trying to speak, like it was warning me about the things I had missed. I started keeping a journal, trying to piece things together, trying to understand how the woman I married could become someone I didn't recognize. I didn't know what I'd find, but I had a feeling the worst was still ahead. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral, but I was still stuck in the same loop: grief, confusion, and long, sleepless nights. I didn't leave the house much. I didn't talk to anyone unless I had to. But I had to meet with my lawyer. My father had left behind a will, and there were papers to sign, accounts to transfer, legal details I didn't have the energy for. So I dragged myself to his office, dressed in the same coat I'd worn to the funeral, still stained with dried rain. He greeted me with a nod, the kind of look people give when they don't know what to say. We sat down, and he started going over my father's estate, calm, professional, routine. Then, just as we were finishing up, he paused. He opened a drawer, pulled out a plain envelope, and placed it in front of me. His expression changed. No more small talk. "This isn't from your dad's will," he said. "It came to my office 2 days ago. I don't know everything, but you should read it in private. And prepare yourself." That got my attention. I took the envelope, looked at it. My name was written on the front, no return address. The paper felt thick, heavy. I didn't open it there. Something in his tone made me want to wait. I thanked him, shook his hand, and left. Back at my father's house, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time just staring at it. I kept thinking, what could possibly be in here? More bad news? Some forgotten bill? A message from beyond the grave? Finally, I opened it. The moment I saw what was inside, I stopped breathing. The first page was a copy of a lease agreement. A second apartment, rented under my wife's name. I blinked, looked again. Yes, her full legal name, signed and dated. But what truly made my heart race was the second name on the lease. Someone with my last name. But it wasn't me. I flipped the pages with shaking hand. A different address. A signed contract from months ago. Proof of payment. Receipts. She'd been living another life. Secretly. Silently. While I thought she was working late or visiting her sister, she was in a completely different apartment. With someone else. Someone connected to me. I read the documents 3 times. I checked every date, every signature, every name. My mind refused to accept it. It was like falling through ice, everything cold, disorienting, sharp. She had gone behind my back in a way I never could have imagined. And this wasn't just cheating. This was calculated. She'd made real plans, paid rent, signed legal documents. She wasn't just distant. She was building something new while tearing us down from the inside. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. She had handed me divorce papers at my father's funeral, and I thought that was the worst part. But now I knew that was just the surface. Just the first piece in something much bigger. Something was going on. Something she had worked hard to keep hidden. But now the cracks were showing, and I was ready to dig deeper. I must have stared at the lease for 10 minutes, hoping I'd missed something, hoping there was some innocent explanation. But every line made things worse. The apartment was in a different part of town, nowhere near where we lived. It wasn't a work apartment or a family property or anything I could make sense of. It was a full rental, fully furnished. Monthly payments signed and approved by my wife. And next to her name, on every single form, was another one. A man's name. Same last name as mine. But it wasn't mine. At first, I thought it might be a typo. Maybe it was a cousin or someone from her side of the family. But I knew that wasn't true. Something about it hit too close. I felt it in my gut. The more I read, the more I realized just how much effort she'd put into keeping this secret. There were bills, internet service, deliveries, everything you'd expect from someone living a second life. A hidden life. And she had gone out of her way to keep me from ever finding out. I started pulling up my memories like puzzle pieces. All the nights she claimed to be working, the weekends she needed time to herself, the sudden trips, the vague answers, the way her mood shifted anytime I asked questions. I had blamed stress. I had blamed grief. I had blamed myself. But now it was clear, she was somewhere else. With someone else. Repeatedly. I couldn't stop looking at the name on that lease. It was familiar, in a way that made my skin crawl. I said it out loud once, just to hear it. Then again, softer. That's when the realization started to form. Slow, cold, and awful. The name wasn't just similar to mine. It was mine in a way. It belonged to my half-brother. We hadn't spoken in a long time. He'd drifted from the family years ago, always chasing fast money and shady deals. My father never trusted him. I tried to keep a little distance, but blood is blood, and I still invited him to the wedding. He didn't come. Said he was busy. I didn't think much of it back then. But now, looking at the lease, I understood everything. He was the one in the apartment with. The betrayal doubled. It wasn't just my wife who'd lied to me. It was someone from my own family. Someone who had stood beside me as a kid, who had shared stories and memories, who knew my weak spots better than anyone. And he used them. I leaned over the kitchen table, heart pounding. The walls of my father's house suddenly felt smaller. He had always warned me to keep my guard up. About both of them. My father never liked her much, and he never forgave my brother for the choices he made. Maybe he'd seen something I didn't. My head was spinning. I felt angry, yes, but more than that, I felt stupid. Used. They'd played me, both of them, and they didn't even bother to hide it well. Maybe they thought I'd never look. Maybe they thought I'd just sign the divorce and let everything go. But they didn't know me. Not anymore. I wasn't about to roll over and let this happen. They wanted a quiet end. What they were going to get was the beginning of a storm. I couldn't sleep after finding that lease. I kept thinking, what else don't I know? If they were bold enough to share an apartment, what else were they hiding? I needed answers, real ones. So, the next morning, I called a private investigator. A friend of a friend had used him during a messy custody battle. I told him everything. The secret lease, the timing, the name on the documents. I didn't want revenge, not yet. I just wanted the truth. It only took him 5 days. He came back with photos, videos, timeline. My wife and my half-brother. Together. Smiling. Laughing. Entering and leaving that apartment like they were a couple. Grocery shopping. Grabbing coffee. Holding hands. There was no question about it. They were in a full relationship. And not some casual fling. This had been going on for months, maybe longer. While I was working extra hours to help pay off my father's hospital bills, they were playing house. But the part that truly knocked the air out of me was this. There were pictures of them with a child. A boy. Around 3 years old. They were picking him up from daycare. Taking him to the park. Feeding him at a cafe. My PI even got a copy of the daycare registration. The child had my last name. That's when everything went quiet inside me. I just sat there, holding those photos, trying to breathe. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or throw up. I did none of those things. I just felt hollow. The boy looked a lot like my brother. Same eyes, same nose. But there was something else. Something I couldn't shake. A small part of me wondered, what if he wasn't my brother's son? What if he was mine? I couldn't ignore that thought. So, without saying a word to either of them, I went to a lawyer and got advice. Then I had my PI retrieve a used cup the boy had left behind at a local cafe. It was risky, possibly unethical, but I didn't care anymore. I needed answers. Real answers. We ran a private DNA test. A week later, I got the results. The child wasn't my son, but he was family. He was my half-brother's son. My wife and my brother had a child together. While I was married to her. While we shared a home, a bed, a life. Everything made sense now. Her coldness, her distance, the fake affection. She wasn't just cheating. She had moved on. Built an entirely separate life behind my back. And she used our marriage as a cover for it all. I should have felt rage. But what I felt most was disgust. Deep soul-level disgust. They thought they could get away with it. That I'd never find out. That I'd just sign the divorce papers and disappear quietly. But they forgot one thing. My father didn't raise a fool. When we got married, I didn't care about paperwork. I was in love. I thought love was enough. But my father had insisted on a prenup. He said it wasn't about trust. It was about being careful. He'd worked hard for everything he built, and he wanted to make sure it stayed in the family. At the time, it felt unnecessary, even cold. But to make him happy, I agreed. So did she. At least, that's what she pretended. We signed it at a small law office downtown, and I never thought about it again. Until now. After everything came crashing down, the secret apartment, the affair, the child, I went back to my lawyer. I needed to know what I was facing in the divorce, what she might take, what she could demand. That's when he pulled out the original prenuptial agreement, the one I'd signed without much thought. He pointed to a section near the end, highlighted in yellow. My father's clause. The agreement stated that if my wife was found to be unfaithful, documented, proven beyond doubt, she would walk away with nothing. No alimony, no claim to shared assets, not even the car we financed together. It was strict, harsh even, but legal. And she had signed it. Willingly. She probably never thought it would come back to haunt her. But now, it was her biggest mistake. I handed my lawyer the photos, the videos, the daycare record, the DNA results, the PI report, everything. He flipped through it all with a slow, careful nod. This is more than enough, he said. She's done. It felt surreal. I had spent weeks drowning in betrayal, and now, suddenly, I was holding the key to everything. All the lies, the sneaking around, the fake affection, it had all led her straight into a trap. One she signed herself into. One my father saw coming long before I ever did. She had been so focused on leaving me broken that she didn't even check the fine print. That prenup was her blind spot. She assumed I'd be too emotional, too hurt to fight back. But that was her biggest mistake, thinking I was still the man she could control. The power shifted in that moment. She thought she was ending things on her terms. But now I had control of the narrative. She couldn't touch my father's house, couldn't touch my savings, couldn't take a dime. And once the court saw what she'd done, she wouldn't walk away looking innocent either. I sat there for a long time after my lawyer left. I kept the prenup in my hands, rereading that clause over and over. My father's words echoed in my head. Always protect yourself, even from the people you love most. At the time, I thought it was too cynical. I thought love meant never needing protection. But he had seen something I didn't. He had sensed it. Maybe not the full betrayal, but something off. And instead of saying it out loud, he made sure the law would speak for him when the time came. And now, here it was, speaking loud and clear. My wife had tried to ruin me, but in the end, it was her own signature that sealed her fate. After reading the prenup for the 5th time, I still couldn't believe how detailed it was. Every sentence, every clause, it was like my father had written it knowing exactly what would happen. At first, I thought it was just the way he operated, always cautious, always planning ahead. But something didn't sit right. There was too much precision, too many protections built specifically around betrayal and deception. It was more than just smart legal thinking. It felt personal, so I started digging. My father kept everything, old files, letters, even notebooks. His study hadn't been touched since he passed. I spent hours going through drawers, flipping through dusty folders, scanning documents. And then, in the back of one filing cabinet behind a false panel, I found a small wooden box. Inside were a few personal letters. Most of them were addressed to me, but had never been sent. The first one started simply, "If you're reading this, then something has gone wrong, and you need to know the truth." I sat there for hours reading his words. My hands were shaking. In these letters, my father explained everything he had seen over the years, things he had noticed but never said out loud. The way my wife spoke to him behind my back, how she once tried to convince him to sign over property in my name. The fake smiles she gave when I wasn't looking. Her lies were small, but he had picked up on them one by one. He didn't want to interfere in our marriage, so he stayed quiet. But he didn't trust her. Not fully. He even hired a private investigator once, years ago, before we were even married. He'd found some suspicious activity back then, messages between her and someone else. She had explained it away, said it was nothing, and my father, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, dropped it. But the feeling never left him. So, instead of confronting me and risking our relationship, he protected me the way he knew best, through legal structure, through quiet planning. The prenup? That was just the surface. He had gone further. He'd moved most of his assets into a trust with strict terms. The house, the land, the investments, all locked down tight, passed directly to me with clauses that made them unreachable by any spouse unless approved by him. He even blocked certain accounts from being co-signed. At the time, I thought he was just being overprotective. Now I saw it clearly. He wasn't just cautious. He was preparing for war. And now, years later, his choices had saved me. He knew she didn't love me the way I loved her. He saw the cracks in her mask before I even noticed the mask existed. And instead of shaming me or accusing her, he waited. He watched. He wrote these letters not to rub it in my face, but to make sure that when the time came, I would understand what he did and why. That night, I sat in his old chair and cried. Not just from grief, not from anger, but from a kind of awe. My father wasn't perfect, but he had seen the storm coming. And even from the grave, he'd built the umbrella I never knew I needed. I waited until the paperwork was complete. Copies of the lease, the PI report, the daycare records, the photos, and of course the prenup. I wanted everything in order. No emotion, no mess. Just the truth in black and white. I drove to the address listed on the lease. Her secret apartment. I'd seen the outside in the photos, but being there in person felt different. Like walking into a nightmare wide awake. I knocked twice. No answer. Then I knocked again loud. I heard shuffling behind the door. Then it opened. She stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair tied back. No makeup. She wasn't expecting me. "Can I come in?" I asked calmly. She hesitated, confused, maybe even nervous. But she stepped aside. Inside, it looked nothing like the home we shared. There were toys in the corner, a child's shoes by the door, a photo on the wall of her, smiling, holding a little boy. I had never seen her smile like that before, not in years. I stepped into the living room, and that's when he came out of the hallway, my half-brother. He froze when he saw me. His eyes widened like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't say anything. I didn't speak to him either. Instead, I walked over to the coffee table and laid everything down. A thick folder. She looked at it, then back at me. "What is this?" she asked, her voice already shaky. "Evidence," I said, "of the life you've been living behind my back." She opened the folder. Her hands started to tremble as she flipped through the photos. Her and my brother holding hands, kissing, picking up the boy from daycare. Then the lease with both their names. And then the final sheet, highlighted, bolded, the prenup clause. The one she forgot. The color drained from her face. "I didn't," she started, but the words died in her throat. "I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't need to." The silence between us was louder than any fight could ever be. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I just wanted you to see what you walked into. What you signed. What you threw away." She looked at my brother, desperate for him to speak. He didn't. He sat down on the couch and stared at the floor. "You're not getting anything," I continued. "No house. No alimony. No sympathy. The prenup makes sure of that. So does everything you've done." She stepped back like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I saw panic in her eyes. The mask she'd worn for years was gone now. There was nothing left but fear and regret. "Why did you come here?" she whispered, barely able to look at me. "To let you know it's over," I said. "And to watch you realize that you lost everything." Then I turned and walked out. No looking back. No second thoughts. She thought she was in control, but in the end, all she did was burn her own life to the ground. The divorce was finalized within weeks. It moved fast, faster than she expected. Once my lawyer submitted the evidence and the prenup clause, there wasn't much left to fight about. She tried to delay things at first, probably hoping I'd soften up or lose my nerve. But I didn't flinch. I'd been through enough. I wasn't going to let her twist the story, not again. In the final agreement, she got nothing. No claim to the house. No share of the savings. No alimony. Not even the car we used to share. Everything stayed in my name, just as the prenup dictated. Legally, she had no leg to stand on. Morally, even less. Every move she made in secret had already been documented. Every lie she told had a receipt attached. She tried to play the victim, claimed I had manipulated her, that I was cold, distant. She even hinted to a few mutual friends that I had been unfaithful first. But the facts crushed every lie before it could spread. The photos, the apartment lease, the daycare forms, the DNA results, the video evidence. People didn't even argue with. They just stopped returning her calls. Her job found out next. I never reached out to them, but word travels. Someone from her office must have seen the documents, or maybe her behavior caught up with her. Either way, she was quietly let go a few days after the court ruling. Breach of ethics is all I heard. Her family was next. They had always supported her blindly. But after everything came out, they distanced themselves too. I guess it's hard to defend someone who cheated with her husband's half-brother and tried to steal everything in the process. Her parents reached out once to apologize to me. That said more than anything. My brother disappeared. No apology, no explanation. Just vanished. I heard he moved to another city. Good. That's one less face I'll ever have to see again. She tried to spin her side of the story online, some dramatic post about heartbreak and starting over. But it didn't gain much sympathy. People aren't stupid. The truth had already been shared, quietly but thoroughly. She had no defense. No backup. Just silence. And I kept thinking back to that day at the funeral. How she handed me that envelope like it was nothing. Cold. Final. She thought she had ended things on her terms. But that envelope became her downfall. It sparked the chain reaction she never expected. She meant to break me. Instead, she exposed herself. I didn't celebrate. I didn't throw a party or brag about it. I just moved on. With peace. With clarity. With everything my father worked for still intact. She walked away with nothing. Because in the end, that's exactly what she deserved. Now I live quietly in the house my father built, the one he protected without saying a word. Sometimes I sit on the porch and think about everything, how close I came to losing it all, how betrayal almost broke me, and how my father's quiet warnings saved me in the end. I visit his grave often. I don't say much. Just a quiet thank you. That prenup wasn't just legal protection. It was his final act of love. A message that even after death, he had my back. What do you think? Did she get what she deserved? Or do you believe people like her deserve second chances? Would you have handled it differently if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your take.